We are just days away from reaching 1,000 subscribers. If we achieve this goal in the next 15 days, we'll be able to keep the channel running and continue bringing you these stories. Your subscription makes all the difference. It's quick and helps us enormously. Marguerite's Sacrifice. Chapter 1. The Poisoned Gift. London, October 1864. In the morning mists of Whitechapel, St. Catherine's Orphanage stood like a beacon of desolation in the heart of the capital's most wretched districts. Behind its walls of brick blackened by soot, 43 abandoned children barely survived under the direction of Marguerite Beaumont, a 28-year-old woman who had devoted her life to these little beings forgotten by all. Marguerite had not been born for this existence. Daughter of a respectable country pastor, she had received a refined education and spoke fluent French, Italian, and German. But fate had decided otherwise. The premature death of her parents had left her orphaned at 18, with only an unshakable faith and limitless compassion for the disinherited as her inheritance. That morning, Marguerite contemplated with anguish the orphanage's meagre provisions. In the pantry, there remained only a half-empty bag of oat porridge, some withered potatoes, and a piece of rancid bacon, enough to feed the children for 2 days at most, and creditors threatened to seize the establishment if the rental arrears were not settled before the end of the month. "Miss Marguerite," said timidly little Sophie, a 6-year-old girl with cheeks hollowed by hunger, "I'm still hungry. Will we have porridge again at noon?" Marguerite knelt before the child and caressed her dull hair. "Of course, my dear. There will always be some for you." But in her heart, she knew it was a lie. How could she feed 43 mouths with so little? How could she protect these innocents from the hunger and cold that lurked at their doors? It was at that precise moment that the hooves of a horse echoed in the cobbled courtyard. Marguerite glanced through the window and saw a man of striking elegance descending from an armorial carriage. Tall, with broad shoulders, he wore a black cashmere coat and a silk top hat that testified to considerable fortune. His fine and aristocratic features, framed by dark brown hair and a carefully trimmed beard, gave him that natural bearing proper to the high nobility. Duke Adrian Blackwood, for it was indeed he, pushed open the orphanage door with an indecipherable expression. At 35, this man was one of the richest in England, owner of vast estates in Yorkshire and Devon, but also one of the most enigmatic. It was whispered in London salons that he was insensitive to feminine charms, and that no woman had ever succeeded in softening his heart of stone. "Miss Beaumont?" he said, removing his hat and revealing eyes of particularly striking steel grey. "Your Grace," replied Marguerite with a curtsy, surprised by this unexpected visit. "What may I do for you?" Adrian examined the Spartan interior of the orphanage, the leprous walls, the cracked windows, the children's meagre possessions arranged in makeshift boxes. But what struck him most was the impeccable cleanliness of the place and the tenderness with which Marguerite addressed the little ones who surrounded her, clinging to her dress like a lifeline. "I have been told that you direct a charitable work here," he said in his grave and measured voice. "I would like to make a donation." Marguerite's heart leaped with hope. "Your generosity would be a blessing, Your Grace. These children need so much." "However," Adrian interrupted, raising his hand, "my donation is not disinterested. I have a condition." Marguerite felt a shiver of apprehension run through her. "Which one, Your Grace?" Adrian looked at her intensely, and she had the troubling impression that he was probing her soul. "I want you to accept this." He drew from his pocket a black velvet case, which he opened with a theatrical gesture. Inside lay the most sumptuous necklace Marguerite had ever seen, a river of dazzling diamonds set in white gold, with at its center a black pearl the size of a walnut of hypnotic beauty. "Your Grace," stammered Marguerite. "I cannot accept such a gift. This necklace must be worth a fortune." "More than you imagine," confirmed Adrian with an enigmatic smile. "This black pearl comes from the South Seas and belonged to Queen Marie Antoinette. The ensemble is worth approximately £50,000. Marguerite felt dizzy. £50,000, enough to operate the orphanage for decades, enough to offer these children an education, a future, a chance in life. "But why me?" she asked, stunned. "Why such a gift to a perfect stranger?" Adrian closed the case and gently placed it in Marguerite's trembling hands. "Call it a millionaire's whim," he said with studied nonchalance, "or perhaps a social experiment. I have heard of your devotion, Miss Beaumont. I am curious to see what a woman like you would do with such a treasure." "An experiment?" repeated Marguerite, troubled. "Exactly. Keep this necklace, wear it, enjoy it, and in exactly 1 month I will return to see what has become of it. If you have known how to appreciate this gift at its true value, I will make a substantial donation to your orphanage. Otherwise—" He left his sentence hanging, but the message was clear. "And if I refuse this gift," asked Marguerite, "then these children will continue to suffer from hunger and cold, and you will bear the responsibility for their misery." Adrian replaced his top hat, bowed courteously, and headed for the door. 1 month, Miss Beaumont. Neither more nor less. Use this time wisely." And he disappeared, leaving Marguerite alone with the case in her hands and a dilemma that would overturn her life. Around her, the children looked at her with wide, curious eyes, ignorant that their destiny had just tilted into uncertainty. Marguerite opened the case again and contemplated this necklace that shone like 1,000 stars. £50,000, enough to save all these innocent little beings. But at what price? And above all, what did this enigmatic man really want, who had just burst into her life like a hurricane? Night fell over Whitechapel, and with it began for Marguerite Beaumont the most difficult of ordeals, resisting temptation to better understand it, keeping her faith intact, faced with a mystery that might well change her destiny forever. The necklace now rested in her modest room, shining in the darkness like an ambiguous promise. Tomorrow she would have to make a decision that would determine the future of 43 orphaned children. And somewhere in the fashionable districts of London, Duke Adrian Blackwood smiled, thinking of this extraordinary woman he had just put to the test. For contrary to what he had implied, this experiment was nothing social. It was deeply personal, and its true stakes went far beyond the simple curiosity of an idle aristocrat. Chapter 2. The Dilemma of the Soul. The days following the Duke's visit were a real ordeal for Marguerite. The necklace, stored in her austere room, seemed to pulse with a life of its own, constantly reminding her of its presence. Each morning, seeing the children's emaciated faces each evening, counting the last coins in the common fund, she felt the weight of this temptation grow. For it was not simply a necklace that Adrian Blackwood had offered her, it was the solution to all her problems. £50,000 represented more money than she would ever see in her entire life. Enough to buy the orphanage, renovate it, hire teachers, feed and clothe the children properly, offer them a worthy future. "Miss Marguerite," said little Thomas, an 8-year-old boy with large brown eyes, "why do you seem so worried? You haven't eaten anything for several days." Marguerite tenderly caressed the child's tousled head. "Don't worry about me, my little one. How are your writing lessons going?" "I'm trying to do well, but it's difficult without real slates. We write on torn pieces of paper with worn-out pencils." Marguerite's heart tightened. With £50,000, Thomas would have the finest slates in London, the best books, the finest pencils. All these children could learn properly, develop their talents, escape the misery that awaited them. That evening, she examined the necklace again by candlelight. The diamonds sparkled like frozen tears, and the black pearl at the center seemed to hypnotize her with its mysterious brilliance. Never had she held something so precious, so beautiful in her hands. She tried it on in front of her small, cracked mirror. Instantly, her modest brown wool dress seemed to transform. The diamonds illuminated her complexion, highlighted the golden gleam of her light brown hair, brought out the deep blue of her eyes. For the first time in her life, Marguerite discovered herself beautiful. "My God," she murmured, touching the precious stones. "Forgive me this vanity." But was it really vanity? Or was it simply a woman discovering her own beauty, hidden for years under the clothes of poverty and sacrifice? A knock at her door tore her from her thoughts. "Miss Marguerite!" It was the voice of Mrs. Henderson, the only help she could afford to employ, a 50-year-old widow with a big heart. "Come in, Mrs. Henderson." The good woman entered and stopped short, seeing Marguerite adorned with the sumptuous necklace. "Lord Jesus, miss, where did you find this marvel?" Marguerite quickly removed the necklace and put it back in its case. "It's a gift. Temporary." "Temporary? But miss, this necklace is surely worth more than everything we own here. Who can make such gifts?" Marguerite told her about Adrian Blackwood's visit and the strange bargain he had proposed. Mrs. Henderson listened with increasingly wide eyes. "But it's Providence, miss. This man offers you the solution to all our problems." "How so?" "Well, sell this necklace. With the money you could—" "Mrs. Henderson," interrupted Marguerite, shocked, "this necklace doesn't really belong to me. The Duke said he would return in a month to see what I had done with it." "So what? He said to appreciate it at its true value, didn't he? What greater value could it have than saving these poor children?" This reflection deeply troubled Marguerite. Was Mrs. Henderson right? What was truly the just value of this necklace? Its aesthetic beauty or its capacity to relieve human suffering? The next day, the orphanage's financial state worsened further. The baker refused to deliver the daily bread until his arrears were settled. The coal merchant did the same, and to crown it all, Mr. Wickham, the building's owner, presented himself with a sinister expression. "Miss Beaumont," said this adipose man with small porcine eyes, "I'm tired of waiting for my rents. If you don't settle the 6 months of arrears within a week, I'm taking back the premises." "Mr. Wickham, I beg you," pleaded Marguerite. "These children have nowhere to go. Grant me a little more time." "Time doesn't feed people, my dear lady. 6 months of arrears makes £300. Find this money or get out with your brats." And he slammed the door, leaving Marguerite devastated. £300. She didn't even have £3 in the fund. That night, she didn't close her eyes. In the next room, she heard little Sophie crying from hunger despite the meagre supper she had shared with the others. How many more nights would these innocents have to endure hunger? How long before they were thrown into the street, delivered to the dangers of Whitechapel? Around 3 in the morning she got up and lit her candle. The necklace sparkled in its case, tempting and accusatory at once. "Lord," "Oh," she murmured, kneeling by her bed, "enlighten me. What should I do? This necklace can save these children, but it doesn't really belong to me. Is it theft to sell it to feed the hungry, or is it a sin to keep it while innocents suffer?" But heaven remained mute, and Marguerite understood that she would have to resolve alone this dilemma that tortured her soul. By morning, her decision was made. She dressed carefully, combed her hair with particular care, and slipped the necklace into her reticule. Then she left the orphanage and headed toward Bond Street, where London's most renowned jewelers were located. Her heart was beating frantically, but her resolution was unshakable. Duke Adrian Blackwood had wanted to test her true nature. He would be served. For Marguerite Beaumont had just chosen her side, that of the children against that of jewels, that of love against that of pride. And too bad if this decision should cost her the esteem of a man whose steel-grey eyes had haunted her nights for a week. Marie Antoinette's necklace was going to accomplish its final mission: transform beauty into goodness, luxury into charity, display into hope. Lucian, Chapter 3, The Sacrifice Accomplished. The House of Rothschild and Sons, jewelers to Her Majesty for 3 generations, commanded respect with its white marble facade and golden reflecting windows. Marguerite stopped for a moment before the imposing storefront, intimidated by the luxury displayed behind the armored glass. Never had she entered such an establishment. "May I help you, miss?" asked a distinguished-looking salesman whose immaculate black attire contrasted with Marguerite's modest dress. "I would like to have a jewel appraised," she said, taking the case from her reticule. The man cast a disdainful glance at the young woman, obviously convinced she was coming to waste his time with some worthless trinket. But when Marguerite opened the case, his expression changed completely. "Good Lord," he murmured, stepping back. Where did you find that?" "It's a family heirloom," lied Marguerite, blushing at this venial but necessary sin. "One moment, please." The salesman disappeared into the back shop and returned a few minutes later, accompanied by an elderly man with white hair and a piercing gaze. "Miss," said the latter with respect mixed with stupefaction, "I am Solomon Rothschild. This object, may I examine it?" Marguerite nodded, and the man took a jeweler's loupe to scrutinize every detail of the necklace. His hands trembled slightly as he manipulated the diamonds and examined the black pearl. "Extraordinary," he murmured. "These diamonds are of exceptional purity, Mazarin cut, from the 18th century. And this pearl, my God, this black pearl, I've only seen one of this quality in my career. It belonged to Marie Antoinette," completed Marguerite. Solomon Rothschild stared at her with amazement. "You know the history of this jewel? It was related to me, Mr. Rothschild. I would like to sell it. How much could you offer me?" The old man delicately replaced the necklace in its case. "Miss, this necklace is a museum piece. Its historical value exceeds even its intrinsic value, which is already considerable. I could offer you £48,000. Marguerite felt her legs give way. £48,000, enough to operate the orphanage for 50 years. "However," continued Solomon Rothschild, "may I ask why you wish to part with such a treasure? It's a priceless inheritance." Marguerite looked him straight in the eyes. "Sir, do you believe that a jewel, even the most beautiful in the world, is worth more than a child's life?" The jeweler frowned, intrigued by this unexpected question. "I have charge of 43 orphans," continued Marguerite. "They are hungry, they are cold, and in a week we will all be on the street if I don't find the money for rent. This necklace can save them. So tell me, Mr. Rothschild, what is its true value?" The emotion in this young woman's voice touched the old jeweler. In her blue eyes, he read a determination and nobility of soul that moved him. "Miss," he said gently, "if such is the case, then this necklace has never had a nobler destiny. I shall immediately have a check prepared for you." An hour later, Marguerite emerged from Rothschild's with a check for £48,000 in her reticule. Her hands still trembled from the enormity of what she had just accomplished. She had sold the Duke's necklace. How would he react upon his return? But these worries took second place when she pushed open the orphanage door. The children greeted her with their smiles, despite their fatigue and hunger. Little Sophie ran to her. "Miss Marguerite, Thomas has fallen ill. He has a high fever and can no longer get up." Marguerite rushed to the dormitory, where little Thomas lay on his straw mattress, burning with fever, his dry lips murmuring incoherent words. Beside him, several other children showed the same symptoms. "Mrs. Henderson," she called, "we must immediately call a doctor." "But, miss, we don't have money for—" Marguerite took the check from her reticule. "Now we do. Call Dr. Morrison immediately and send for medicines, food, coal to heat the rooms. Spare no expense." Mrs. Henderson's eyes widened, seeing the amount on the check. "Holy Mother of God. Miss, where did you find all this money?" "It doesn't matter. What's important is saving these children." The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Dr. Morrison diagnosed a typhus epidemic, favored by malnutrition and the unsanitary conditions. But thanks to Marguerite's money, they could buy the necessary medicines, feed the children properly, heat the orphanage, and even bring in a nurse to assist her. Gradually, the sick children regained their strength. Thomas was the first to get up, pale but smiling. "Miss Marguerite," he said, throwing himself into her arms, "I thought I was going to die, but you saved me." "No, my little one," she murmured, embracing him. "You saved me." For it was true. Seeing these children regain health and hope, Marguerite understood she had made the right decision. The necklace had accomplished its true mission, transform sterile beauty into living love. She immediately settled the rental arrears, stupefying Mr. Wickham, who didn't expect to see a penny of his debts. She bought the orphanage, had it renovated, hired real teachers and a cook. For the first time in years, the children of St. Catherine's ate their fill and slept warm. But as the month drew to an end, Marguerite's anxiety grew. How could she explain to Duke Adrian Blackwood what she had done with his precious gift? How could she justify what he would probably consider theft? On the 29th day, she received a laconic message. "Tomorrow, as agreed. A.B." That night she didn't sleep. Tomorrow she would have to face the anger of a man she had betrayed, even if it was for the noblest of causes. Tomorrow she would have to assume the consequences of her choice. But looking through her window at the children playing in the courtyard, well-fed and healthy, she knew she would do exactly the same thing again. For some treasures are worth all the sacrifices in the world, and the most precious of all is not made of diamonds and gold, but of children's laughter and tears of gratitude. Chapter 4. The Confrontation. The next morning, exactly 1 month after his first visit, Duke Adrian Blackwood descended from his carriage in front of St. Catherine's orphanage. But what he discovered left him speechless. The dilapidated building he had left had given way to a renovated building with freshly painted walls, repaired windows adorned with clean curtains. In the courtyard, well-dressed children with rosy cheeks played joyfully under the supervision of a governess. The smell of fresh bread escaped from a visibly reorganized kitchen. "What?" he murmured. Bewildered, he pushed open the entrance door and was greeted by a transformed interior. The decrepit walls had been whitewashed, the floor repaired and polished. Educational paintings adorned the classrooms where studious children took their lessons with real teachers. "Your Grace!" exclaimed Mrs. Henderson, recognizing him. "Miss Marguerite is expecting you in her office. This way, please." Marguerite's office had also been metamorphosed. Shelves filled with books, decent furniture, and especially behind the desk, Marguerite herself. But what a Marguerite! Her hair was carefully styled, her fine navy blue wool dress highlighted her elegant silhouette, and her face radiated new serenity. "Your Grace," she said, rising to greet him. "Welcome." Adrian remained speechless for a moment, struck by this woman's transformation. The effaced and poorly dressed Marguerite he had left had given way to a dignified and radiant establishment director. "Miss Beaumont," he finally said, recovering his composure, "I confess that what I discover here surprises me. This orphanage has been entirely renovated. How did you finance such work?" Marguerite met his gaze without flinching. "Thanks to your generous gift, Your Grace." "My gift?" Adrian frowned. "May I see the necklace I entrusted to you?" The moment of truth had arrived. Marguerite breathed deeply and said with a calm that surprised even herself, "I sold it." The silence that followed was deafening. Adrian looked at her with an expression of total incredulity, as if he couldn't understand what she had just said. "You sold it," he repeated in a white voice. "Yes, Your Grace, at Rothschild and Sons for £48,000. Adrian collapsed into an armchair, his face livid. "You sold a necklace worth £50,000 to renovate an orphanage." "To save these children," corrected Marguerite. "Your Grace, when you gave it to me, several of them were dying of hunger and disease. Little Thomas had typhus that could have taken him. With the necklace money, I was able to have them treated, feed them, offer them decent shelter and education." Adrian rose brutally, his grey eyes flashing. "Do you realize what you have done? This necklace was unique. It had belonged to Marie Antoinette. It was a priceless historical treasure. And now it's 43 lives saved," replied Marguerite without faltering. "Tell me, Your Grace, what has more value? A jewel in a case or the smile of a child who won't die of hunger?" "It wasn't your decision to make," exploded Adrian. "This necklace didn't belong to you. You had given it to me, for you to wear it, to enjoy it, not to destroy it." Marguerite felt anger rise in her at the injustice of these reproaches. "Destroy it? I made this necklace into something infinitely more beautiful than a simple ornament. I turned it into hope, health, future for innocence." "You understand nothing," roared Adrian. "This necklace was a test. I wanted to see if you were like all the others, attracted by luxury and wealth. I wanted to see if you would wear it, if you would show off with it, and instead of that—" He stopped short, realizing he had said too much. "Instead of that?" asked Marguerite in a dangerously calm voice. Adrian looked away, unable to meet her gaze. "Instead of that, you sold it to feed vagabonds." This time Marguerite exploded. "Vagabonds! These children are orphans. They committed no other crime than being born in poverty, and you dare call them vagabonds? Miss Beaumont, you don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," she interrupted, her eyes bright with tears of anger. "I understand that you are a rich and cynical man who amuses himself testing human nature, like others collect butterflies. I understand that you set me a trap to satisfy your morbid curiosity. Well, Your Grace, I hope you are satisfied with the result." She went to her desk and took out a stack of documents. "Here are the receipts for everything that was purchased with your necklace's money: medicines, food, coal, construction materials, workers' wages, teachers' and doctors' salaries. Every penny was spent on these children. Check for yourself." Adrian took the documents with a trembling hand. Reading through the invoices, he realized the extent of what Marguerite had accomplished. She had not only saved the orphanage, but transformed it into a true educational institution. "Miss Beaumont," he said in a calmer voice, "You misinterpreted my intentions." "Really? And what exactly were they?" Adrian looked at her for a long time, and for the first time she saw in his eyes something other than anger. Confusion, admiration, and something else she couldn't identify. "I wanted to know your true nature," he admitted. "To know if you were different from the other women I have known." "And now you know," said Marguerite bitterly. "I am a woman capable of stealing a necklace to feed starving children. If that's what you were seeking to discover, you are now informed." "No," murmured Adrian, "that's not what I discovered." He approached her, and in his grey eyes, Marguerite read an emotion she had never seen in a man. "What I discovered," he continued, "is the most extraordinary woman I have ever met. A woman capable of sacrificing a priceless treasure to save strangers. A woman whose true beauty doesn't come from the jewels she wears, but from the nobility of her soul." and before Marguerite could react, he took her hand and brought it to his lips in a gesture of unexpected tenderness. Duke Adrian Blackwood, the man with a heart of stone, had just fallen in love for the first time in his life. Chapter 5. The Revelation of the Heart. Marguerite quickly withdrew her hand, her heart beating wildly. This unexpected gesture of tenderness had troubled her more than she wanted to admit. "Your Grace," she said, trying to maintain a detached tone, "your beautiful words won't change the fact that I sold your necklace. If you wish to press charges against me, feel free to do so." Adrian looked at her with an expression of sincere pain. "Marguerite, may I call you Marguerite? Miss Beaumont will suffice amply. Miss Beaumont, then, I owe you apologies. My behavior was inexcusable. This test, this trial, I now realize how cruel it was." Marguerite went to the window to avoid his gaze. In the courtyard, the children continued playing, oblivious to the drama unfolding in their benefactress's office. "Why?" she asked without turning around. "Why set me this trap? What did you have to gain from it?" Adrian sighed deeply. "Because I am a bitter and disillusioned man, Miss Beaumont. Yes. Because I have been betrayed so many times by women who were only interested in my fortune and my title that I had come to believe there were no pure souls left in this world." "And so you decided to corrupt me to confirm your cynicism?" "Yes," he admitted with shame. "I wanted to see you wear this necklace, show off with it, perhaps even exchange it for other jewels or a beautiful dress. I wanted to prove that even a woman who devotes herself to orphans could be seduced by luxury." Marguerite turned around, her eyes bright with anger. "What an opinion you have of human nature, and of me in particular." "I was wrong," said Adrian, approaching her. "Completely wrong, what you did. This sacrifice. I never would have imagined such nobility of soul could exist." "Oh, what I did was nothing extraordinary," replied Marguerite. "Anyone with a minimum of compassion would have acted the same, faced with these children's suffering." "No," said Adrian firmly. "No, Marguerite. I have mingled with this country's elite duchesses, countesses, women of perfect education and irreproachable reputation. None of them would have sacrificed a £50,000 necklace to save Whitechapel orphans. Then you frequent the wrong people." Adrian burst into joyless laughter. "Undoubtedly, but you, Marguerite, you have restored my faith in humanity. You have shown me what true nobility is." Marguerite crossed her arms, still mistrustful. "And what do you intend to do now? Tell this amusing anecdote in your salons. How I gave a necklace to an orphan girl, and how she sold it to feed her charges." Adrian's face hardened. "You really take me for a monster, don't you? I no longer know what to think of you, Your Grace. You arrive here with your grand airs, you set me a trap, you get angry when I choose humanity over materialism, and now you claim to admire me. Forgive me for not following your mood variations." Adrian sat heavily, suddenly aged. "You're right. I am a confused, contradictory man. But do you know why?" Marguerite didn't answer, waiting for him to continue. "Because you have overturned all my certainties. For a month I haven't stopped thinking about you, about your devotion to these children, about your simple and natural beauty, about the way you look at me, without fear or cupidity. You're the first woman I've met who doesn't seek to seduce me for my title or my fortune." "Because neither your title nor your fortune interests me," replied Marguerite sharply. "I know, and that's exactly why I'm falling in love with you." This brutal declaration left Marguerite speechless. She looked at this powerful and arrogant man who had just revealed his feelings with disarming sincerity. You don't know what you're saying," she stammered. "Yes, Marguerite. For the first time in my life, I know exactly what I'm saying. I love you. I love your compassion, your courage, your integrity. I love the way you stood up to me, the way you defended your convictions. I love this light. I see shining in your eyes when you speak of these children." Marguerite felt her defenses waver. In Adrian's voice, she perceived an emotion he couldn't feign. But mistrust was still too strong. "How can I ever trust you?" she asked. "You lied to me from our first meeting. This necklace, this supposed social experiment. How can I believe this declaration of love isn't a new test?" Adrian rose and approached her, stopping just close enough for her to smell his masculine scent. "Because," he said, looking into her eyes, "I'm going to prove my sincerity to you. I'm going to make a donation of £100,000 to your orphanage, without conditions, without compensation. So these children have everything they need to grow and flourish." Marguerite's eyes widened. £100,000? £100,000, and if that's not enough to convince you of my sincerity, I'll give more, whatever you want. But why? Why would you do this? Adrian reached toward her face and gently caressed her cheek. This time she didn't pull back. "Because you taught me that true wealth isn't found in safes, but in the capacity to love and give. Because thanks to you, I discovered that my heart wasn't dead. And because I want to spend the rest of my life earning the love of a woman like you." For the first time since the beginning of this conversation, Marguerite saw in Adrian's grey eyes a touching vulnerability. This proud and powerful man had just laid his heart bare before her. But was she ready to do the same? Was she ready to trust this man who had first deceived her, then hurt her, before claiming to love her? The answer to this question would determine not only her future, but that of all the children who depended on her. And deep in her heart, despite her mistrust, a small voice whispered that Adrian Blackwood might finally be telling the truth. Chapter 6. The Test of Trust. The weeks following Adrian's declaration were marked by assiduous and respectful courtship. True to his promise, the Duke immediately transferred £100,000 to the orphanage account, a sum that allowed Marguerite to envision projects she would never have dared hope for, purchasing the neighboring building to expand the establishment, creating professional training workshops, hiring a permanent medical team. But Adrian didn't content himself with his financial donation. Every day he came to visit the orphanage, no longer as a condescending grand lord, but as a man sincerely interested in the children's fate. He financed the installation of a library, a science laboratory, and even a small theatre where the orphans could give performances. "Miss Marguerite," said little Sophie one day, tugging at her dress, "the Duke gentleman is nice now. Before he scared me with his cold eyes. But now he smiles when he sees me." It was true. Adrian had metamorphosed. The haughty and cynical man had given way to someone simpler, more human. He knelt to speak to the children, helped Thomas with his arithmetic lessons, and listened patiently to their 1,000 questions. "Your Grace," said Marguerite one afternoon, finding him in the courtyard playing hoops with the youngest, "you're not obligated to spend so much time here. You surely have more important obligations." Adrian stopped playing and approached her, his face grave. "Marguerite, nothing is more important to me than being here. These children and you. You have become my priority." "Why?" she asked, still mistrustful despite the proofs of his sincerity. "Because for the first time in my life I feel useful. My wealth, my titles, my properties, all of that seemed empty of meaning. But here, seeing Sophie's smile when she succeeds in reading a difficult word, or Thomas's expression when he understands a math problem, I finally understand what it means to give meaning to one's life." Marguerite looked at him attentively. In his grey eyes, she no longer saw any trace of former arrogance. In its place shone a sincerity that troubled her deeply. "Adrian," she said, using his first name for the first time, "are you sure of your feelings? Are you certain this isn't simply gratitude or the effect of novelty?" He approached her, close enough for her to see the small lines that creased at the corners of his eyes when he smiled. "Marguerite, I am 35 years old. I have courted duchesses. I have been pursued by the most beautiful heiresses in Europe. Do you really think I wouldn't know how to recognize true love when it knocks at my heart's door? But we are so different. You are a duke. I grew up in a country rectory. You move in high society. I live among Whitechapel's poor. How could such love overcome so many obstacles?" Adrian took her hands in his, and this time she didn't withdraw them. "Marguerite, these differences that frighten you are exactly what make me love you. You showed me a world I ignored, values I had forgotten. Thanks to you, I'm no longer just a rich idler. I've become a man with a mission." "What mission?" "To help those who need it, to transform my fortune into hope for the disinherited, to make my life something beautiful and useful, but especially to make happy the woman who opened my eyes to what true wealth is." These words touched Marguerite to the depths of her heart. Despite her resistance, she was beginning to believe that Adrian had really changed, that his love was sincere, but one final test would determine the solidity of his feelings. One November evening, Mr. Wickham, the orphanage's former owner, returned to the attack with a dishonest proposition. Having learned that the establishment had benefited from considerable donations, he claimed to have rights to part of the money. "Miss Beaumont," said this repugnant man, invading Marguerite's office, "I have claims on this building. If you don't pay me £50,000 immediately, I'll seize everything." "Mr. Wickham," replied Marguerite firmly, "you have been paid in full. You have no rights over this establishment." "We'll see what justice says about that. I have friends at the tribunal, friends who don't like seeing common folk get rich at the expense of their superiors." It was at that moment that Adrian entered the office. Seeing Marguerite's distress and Wickham's threatening attitude, his face hardened. "Sir," he said in his most glacial voice, "may I know what brings you here?" Wickham turned around and paled upon recognizing the Duke. Your Grace, it's a private matter." "Any matter concerning Miss Beaumont concerns me equally. Explain yourself." Wickham stammered an incoherent story of imaginary debts and violated rights. Adrian listened with terrifying calm, then simply said, "Mr. Wickham, you have exactly 30 seconds to leave this establishment. If you set foot here again, or if you harass Miss Beaumont in any way whatsoever, you'll deal with my lawyers, and believe me, they are much less patient than I am." The man fled without asking for more, but not without shouting, "This story isn't over!" Adrian turned to Marguerite, who was trembling with anger and indignation. "Marguerite, this man will never cause you trouble again. I give you my word. Adrian, you shouldn't involve yourself in—" "Yes," he interrupted, taking her in his arms, "I involve myself in everything that concerns you, because I love you, and I want to protect you, because your fight has become mine." And for the first time, Marguerite had no more doubt about the sincerity of his feelings. This powerful man was ready to defend her, to protect her work, to share her ideals. In his arms, she finally understood that she too was falling in love. Marie Antoinette's necklace had accomplished a miracle much greater than expected. It had not only saved the orphans, but it had also transformed a cynical duke into a generous man and a mistrustful orphanage director into a loving woman. Love had triumphed over diamonds, and the human heart had proven more precious than all the treasures in the world. Chapter 7. The Epilogue of Happiness. 6 months later, on a beautiful spring morning, the small church of St. Catherine in Whitechapel resounded with joyful bells. For the first time in its history, this humble sanctuary was hosting a duke's wedding. Adrian had insisted that the ceremony take place in Marguerite's neighborhood, among the people she loved and who loved her. Marguerite was radiant in her ivory silk dress, simple but perfectly elegant. She wore no jewelry, having refused all those Adrian had wanted to offer her. "The real diamonds," she had said, "are our children's smiles." For that's what she now called the orphans of St. Catherine. Their children. Adrian had officially adopted them all, giving them his name and ensuring each would receive the best possible education. "My friends," said the pastor, addressing the heterogeneous assembly that filled the church, orphans in their Sunday best, servants in their finest clothes, peers of the realm in full uniform, respectable bourgeois and smiling beggars, we celebrate today the union of Adrian and Marguerite, but also that of two worlds that everything seemed to separate. Thomas, now 9 years old and ring-bearer, looked at his adoptive parents with immense pride. Thanks to them, he could read, write, calculate, and dreamed of becoming a doctor to treat the poor like himself. "Papa Adrian," he had said the day before, "is it really true that Mama Marguerite sold a queen's necklace to save us?" "It's true, my son," Adrian had replied, "and thanks to this sacrifice she saved us all, you, your brothers and sisters, and me too." After the ceremony, the reception took place in the orphanage gardens, transformed for the occasion into a festive park. Tables had been set under flowered arbors, and for the first time in their lives, the children of Whitechapel mingled with lords and ladies, united in common joy. "Your Grace," said Solomon Rothschild, approaching Adrian, "may I congratulate you on this marriage? Your wife is a remarkable woman." "Indeed," replied Adrian, watching Marguerite dance with little Sophie. "And do you know, Mr. Rothschild, that I owe you eternal gratitude?" "To me? Why?" "Because by agreeing to buy Marie Antoinette's necklace, you allowed my wife to reveal her true nature. Without you, I would never have discovered the extent of her generosity." Solomon Rothschild smiled. "This necklace found its most beautiful destiny, Your Grace. Never has a jewel accomplished a nobler mission." In a corner of the gardens, Mrs. Henderson wiped away a tear of emotion, watching her dear Miss Marguerite radiate with happiness. "Who would have believed," she said to her neighbor, "that a sold necklace could bring so much joy?" "It's because love is worth more than all the diamonds in the world," replied the wise woman. At sunset, when the last guests had taken their leave and the children were tucked in bed, Adrian and Marguerite found themselves alone in the orphanage gardens. They sat on the bench Adrian had installed near the fountain and looked at their domain with satisfaction. "Marguerite," said Adrian, taking his wife's hand, "do you ever regret having sold that necklace?" Marguerite smiled and looked around her. The orphanage transformed into a true school, the children happy and healthy, the man she loved at her side. "How could I regret the best decision of my life? This necklace was beautiful, certainly, but what is a jewel compared to all this?" Adrian brought her hand to his lips. "You know, when I gave you that necklace, I thought I was setting a trap. In reality, I was the one who fell into it. The trap of love. The trap of true wealth. You taught me, my darling, that the most precious goods cannot be bought. They are conquered through kindness, preserved through generosity, and multiplied when shared." They remained thus for a long time, embraced under the stars, listening to the muffled laughter still escaping from the dormitory where the children exchanged their impressions of this magical day. "Papa Adrian," Sophie had said before falling asleep, "now we're a real family." "The truest of all," he had replied, kissing the little girl's forehead. And it was true. This family, born of a sacrifice, had grown in love to become stronger than all blood families. For Adrian and Marguerite had discovered that true love doesn't content itself with uniting two hearts. It radiates strongly enough to illuminate all the lives it touches. 10 years later, St. Catherine's Orphanage had become London's most respected charitable institution. Thomas had indeed become a doctor and directed the adjoining free clinic. Sophie taught the youngest, and all the former residents, now adults, regularly returned to see their adoptive parents. Adrian and Marguerite had 3 biological children who grew up considering the orphans as their natural brothers and sisters. And when asked what her most beautiful jewel was, the Duchess of Blackwood always pointed to the nursery where all her children of the heart played together. Marie Antoinette's necklace had disappeared, melted into generosity and love. But its true beauty now shone in the eyes of all those it had saved, educated, and nourished. For the most beautiful diamonds are not those that adorn necks, but those that illuminate the smiles of happy children.